Hello and welcome to Patton's webcast series, Leaders and Learning in Literacy. My name is Dr. Pam Kastner, and I have the honor of serving as Patton's State Lead Consultant for Literacy. In this webcast series, we interview practitioners and researchers that are prominent in the field so we can share evidence-aligned practices with all of you. Today, it is my absolute great honor to welcome Dr. Mary Dahlgren to our webcast series. Dr. Dahlgren is a National LETRS trainer and the founder of Tools for Reading. Welcome, Mary.
Hi, Pam. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to join you and talk
We're very
about
excited.
sound walls today.
Yes. Anything you want to share with our audience before we jump right into sound walls?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm, as you said, a literacy consultant from Oklahoma. Born and raised in Oklahoma City, but I've had the great pleasure of teaching letters here and travel all over the United States, teaching, working in classrooms and in various places around the United States and in Australia. So that's been a fun adventure, is to create sound walls in Australia and learn about different sounds. But regardless of where I go, the issues tend to be the same. Mm-hmm. The struggles that children have are really based in underlying issues of the phonology and the orthography and developing that match between the two. So I'm so excited and moving them forward.
Yes, and so sound walls is our topic for this webcast. It's a very hot topic in literacy for sure, and certainly here in Pennsylvania. So many questions about, what is a sound wall? Why would we use a sound wall? Because it is a shift for a lot of teachers. So why don't we start out with, what is a sound wall, Mary?
Okay, so a sound wall is a little bit different than a word wall. Is with word walls and the use of word walls in classrooms, but the problem with a word wall is that we use 26 letters and mm-hmm. they're organized around that first letter, which might not be the sound that word is attached to, that's attached to the word that we're putting up. So I typically use a word like the number one. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. when you have one on a word wall, it's under O. Yes. And you have of on a word wall and it's under O.
Right,
and
right.
So so with the sound wall, I don't know if you can see my sound wall. I put up a sound wall here behind me, and we have the 44 speech sounds of the English language. And a sound wall is organized, one with consonants on one side, and over here I have my vowels. Mm-hmm. And the idea of the sound wall is that we use the speech sounds. So really lots of learning that has come through our LETRS professional development, yes. through Louisa Moats, Earl Coleman, mm-hmm. That have taught us these things. But the idea that a sound wall starts with in the front of your mouth, where do we make those speech sounds, getting mm-hmm. children to notice those things, and really, as importantly, getting teachers to notice those things. And we move from the front of our mouth to the middle of our mouth where those sounds made, to the back of the mouth. And then we talk about the airflow, what's happening mm-hmm. as you're producing those sounds. Where's the air coming from? Is it a quick push of air that we call a stop sound? Is it a nasal sound where the sound's coming through my nose? Are they continuous sounds? So paying attention to the features of the sounds, making those connections for children, because we know children go from speech to print.
Right.
And yes. That's what the beauty of the sound wall is that we move from speech to print. And we're using the pictures on the sound wall. I don't have any words or even graphics posted here, but we use the pictures so that children have something to anchor to, because when you say a sound, so if I say the sound is over. Right. But if I have a picture, I have something concrete to anchor that to. And what does that look like when I start to make the sound? And of course, there's value in mirrors, being able to look at a partner, replicating right. that sound. But really, importantly, that a teacher is able to describe the features of a sound so that a child is developing that awareness of those sounds.
Right, so they're feeling the place and the
So
manner,
that's
the articulation. So for kids, it's very, very concrete. It's really anchoring them in that speech first rather than starting with print, whereas you notice where many words are under a word wall based on the feature of the first letter, and they don't make those sounds. So where do kids begin, especially when they're reading and writing? They begin with speech. You know, as a kindergarten teacher for 18 years, when my kids were in their little writing center, they were first sounding out the words, right? First speech, and then mapping that to print. And yet, I can say, you know, I didn't know better years ago about sound walls. And so it's so exciting to know better and do better and to work with teachers, because that's really where kids begin. They begin with speech. And really a word wall is from the learner, from the teacher's point of view and not the learner's. So the sound wall is a pretty fundamental shift. But I know when I talk with teachers about, you know, where do kids begin? They begin with speech. You know, why do kids sometimes make errors with spelling? All about where kids are feeling those articulatory gestures in their mouth. I was just telling a story yesterday when I was training some teachers, you know, bearing my soul about mistakes I made when I was teaching when I didn't know. I had a little guy in kindergarten who had an aquarium at home and loved to write about fish. And, you know, in the writing center, always writing, I like fish. And he was writing it, I like vish. And I was correcting him orthographically. I was saying, you know, honey, let's listen. You hear f, and that is an F, right? That's the sound for F, and then we write that with an F. But what he was doing, so I was correcting it orthographically, but it was a phonological error. And so it might have helped him write the word fish, but it didn't help him write any other word that made the f sound, because he memorized, you know, eventually fish. But I didn't know. I didn't know about articulatory gestures, consonant and phonemes, vowel phonemes, especially, you know, in my undergrad, graduate, even my reading cert. When I thought about vowels, it was like A, E, I, O, and U, not the 19 vowel sounds that we have. And of course, how close they are in articulatory gesture. And when I talk to teachers about that, they go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That it begins with our kids and they begin with speech.
Oh, you're absolutely right. So I don't know if you can see on my wall here. Can you see this one? And I can grab the card that's here. So maybe this might be easier to see.
Yes.
Where you have the card. And so the insight is to put your top teeth on your bottom lip, and blow. And what's the difference between the and the sound? So getting them to contrast that. And I think that kids, they begin to figure those things out. Eventually, many of them do. But how much more efficient would it be if, man, my teacher just told me, Pam, I see why you wrote it, the v or the sound. Let me explain why.
Right.
And because I went through those same things, and I would say, geez, F and V, they don't look anything alike. They don't, but there's something that is shared with those phonemes. And that's why a sound wall is so important.
Yeah, it is. It anchors kids in these. And I love your kid lips that show kids making these articulatory gestures, so we can have these on our sound walls. I know you also too encourage teachers to do kid lips pictures of their own kids, and a lot of my teachers do it that way as well. Yeah. So that's exciting, because the kids will go up and say, well, I'm making the B sound. So an important part about a sound wall too, you mentioned the articulatory gestures, but also really teachers knowing how to make those sounds. It's easy to engage in the dreaded schwa. I actually have a t-shirt from the school that I worked with that said schwa happens. So do you want to talk about schwa and how important it is to really make those and model the speech sounds really well and accurately?
Yes, and I think that's a big issue that I see with teachers, but with children also. And by getting right back. So teaching teachers, when you say the p sound, you don't say p,
right?
But we have to cut that off. And the same thing with the b sound, that we don't want a b or a d. that we have to cut that off, which the being the schwa sound, and really being very clear about those sounds so that children can identify this. And that's going to be important because we're going to start blending these sounds together. And when I'm blending sounds together, I need pure sounds so I can actually hear the word that I'm reading, as opposed to these sounds that don't really match up to any word that I know. So I'll be able to recall those things easily and automatically and rapidly, and I'm storing those sounds accurately and able to retrieve those sounds as I do that.
Same with writing. You know, oftentimes when we talk with teachers about sound walls, they'll say, "Oh, that's why my student is writing like a U or an A after that sound," and I didn't understand why, because they are creating that schwa sound. So it shows up in writing too. You know, visible. It's really a visible track of what they know about phonology and orthography, right?
Yeah.
And how interrelated they are. Yeah.
And I have to say, Pam, back to your example of writing and watching one of your students, and I know many students that we saw these errors with, and we didn't know that were phonological errors, and that's again where a sound wall comes in to, one, help our students, but to also help teachers know, like, what kind of corrective feedback do I give? And I can, again, give that more precise feedback if I have this information. And we have a beginning of the year testing going on right now. And that I work with right now, I work with several days a month. I was analyzing their spelling errors that the children were making. And we have a high number of Hispanic students in this school. And really, one of the interesting things that was happening in third and fourth grade, they're asked to spell a word, and they have to find the words. This is a computer-based assessment, and they have to find the letters and spell the word. Well, the word was meal. The word was meal, as in I'm going to have a meal. To my meal for lunch, and many of the children spelled it M-I-L.
Yes,
and
as you would expect.
So, and so as a Spanish speaker, I use I because I says the E sound in Spanish. So I always start to think about the word yes in Spanish. It's C, and I represents the E sound. So then, we can bring in for our EL students why they have errors also. And boy, if I can provide that explicit instruction and say, good for you, I see why you would have done that. One, validate them, right? And then two, here's what I need you to know about the English language. So all of these, using these tools in so many different ways for our students, as opposed to my old strategy of, you didn't pay attention to that word, go write it 5 times each.
And memorize. It really anchors kids in the way our English language works. We created symbols to represent speech, right? And so, and we use the sounds to anchor onto the letters and letter patterns, and so it makes logical sense. But I always wonder, like, why didn't we know this before? So it's just exciting for teachers, I think, to make this switch, and it's really a fundamental switch from a word wall. So how do teachers usually start? How do the teachers tiptoe in? How have you seen it best implemented? I know teachers go about it in different ways, but some advice from you?
They do, yeah. So I've really gone back and forth on this with teachers and figuring things out. At some points, teachers are building the sound walls, so they're placing the sounds on the walls as they're introducing them, and that works best in first and second grade because, well, one, by second grade you would have all these up because the students have been exposed to these. In first grade, I say, again, you put all the pictures up, but now we're going to begin adding the graphemes. So when I'm adding the graphemes, and let me just say, for example, when I'm spelling with the long A, you see the chart, right? So I might have this spelling up with next to the long A picture. But but I'm going to cover up the A that's as an apron, and AI and AY. I haven't taught those vowel teams yet, but early on we teach A consonant E to spell the long sound. So as I begin to teach those graphemes that match that phoneme, then I uncover them.
Right.
So that's really in first grade, kind of deciding, what graphemes. Well, I expect them to know apple, because that was taught in kindergarten. So that was yeah. So and I have the bat, and that that would be exposed. But then that's how I encourage teachers to do that. As you teach the grapheme, one really key piece, review the phonemes every day. Do a quick review of them, talking about the sounds, what's the variation, and that should just be part of my morning warm-up. Use little mirrors to look in as your children are saying the sounds and ask questions. So if I have the sound and pointing to the sound, I have on this card this and the z sound. Which one is voiced? Like just little quick questions to help engage with the sound wall, to get children to notice those sounds, because that's where they're going to develop that ownership. And now, man, I get to build that phonological processor. I'm mapping it to that orthographic processor, and I'm beginning to make those quick connections. And we know that's what it takes to get to what we call orthographic mapping. How do we get to that? Dave Kilpatrick's term, the really Lene Aries term that Dave has made so prevalent for us in the last couple of years. But this idea that how do we get there? And it's not flashcards.
Right, I know.
Right?
Yes, and memorizing, and because it just doesn't transfer. Kids come to an unknown word then, and they have no way to attack that word. Yeah, so I know the kindergarten teachers are going to ask. So we talked about first grade and likely second grade. But what about kindergarten teachers? Because a lot of my schools are really they're putting sound walls in K1 too. So always lots of questions about what does it look like. And I love how you bring to the forefront about how we cover what we haven't taught yet. And typically, when we're thinking about the scope and sequence for matching sound and print, we're starting with what's most frequently the way the sound is spelled. We're going from most frequent to least frequent for kids. But we have a pretty logical scope and sequence for that. Hopefully schools have that, so they know how and when to map, right? And know when kids should master or when they might be introduced. But what about the kindergarten teachers? They're pretty much like they're the first entry into, and so important to be teaching those speech sounds. But what about how we would map maybe graphemes onto those?
So the thing that I do, I tell kindergarten teachers, if you're using a well-designed phonological awareness program that gets you into phonemic awareness right away, when I'm working with those types of things, I'm playing with words, I'm building language, I'm not adding the print yet, but I'm starting to segment words, blend words, and even let's just identify what's the vowel sound. Do you hear the eh sound as I say these words, right? So I encourage kindergarten teachers, again, to go ahead and put up the mouth pictures and then put the key words up so they can begin to connect that picture with the sound that's up. And then in kindergarten, now I'm going to be pulling off the picture of the apple when I teach short a, then I'm going to show them the print. So I've been back and forth on this, and do I just put up one thing at a time? But it's what I know is that if it's in kindergarten and I say, oh, well, we just work with short vowels. Well, you teach short vowels in kindergarten and you're working with blending CVC words. But when you are doing things like mapping and tapping and segmenting words, I'm teaching my students to segment a word like lake. So I have lake, that A sound. So I'm developing a awareness for A.
Right.
Am I asking my students to spell the word lake?
No.
Not in kindergarten. But do they know that sound? Yes. And how about the word book? And so I have the b,
right.
And is not a grapheme that's taught in kindergarten. But do I know those sounds? Yeah, I know those sounds.
Yeah.
So I really feel we need to go ahead and talk about those sounds, because now I'm again creating that anchor for those students. So, I know that sound. So when you introduce it to me in first grade, man, I've got Velcro to that spell.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it takes a little bit of, wait, we've never done that kind of thing. But again, I'm not asking you to spell those sounds. I just want you to create that awareness, because
to be aware of that.
Now I have the cognitive information onto.
We had a chat earlier too. I said, we typically wouldn't teach the CK after a short vowel sound for the K sound, but if I had a student in my class whose name was Jack, right, it would come up organically, and we could talk about it. So about how with his kids, of course, the kids are seeing how the name is. Why is that spelled with a CK, right? And so these things come up, and so we don't want to limit ourselves. I think probably, as we said before, we want to have a scope and sequence so that we know what each grade level is really responsible for, right? But not hinder the wealth of phoneme sounds for both consonants and vowels, so that kids can have access to those as well. But what will they own for that grade level? So important.
Right.
Yeah. So another thing that happens a lot is I get a lot of emails about where do I put my high frequency words? And so it's almost as if we want to transfer the word wall into a sound wall, but move those words that were on the word wall over to the sound wall. And another thing I want to point out that you really brought up is, for the most part, I see word walls as mostly they were wallpaper. They were in rooms, but they were more of a static instructional tool. And really what you were describing is a dynamic tool that kids interact with and own. So it's not just up there in the room, and we've moved from a word, because you can do both. You could go from a word wall to a sound wall and really not maximize or amplify what you could do with phonology and orthography. So it's about those daily routines, anchoring kids in those. And then say you're in the writing center and kids are, maybe you're working with them, they're sending out, oh, go to the sound wall. What is your mouth doing? What is your lips doing? Having those little mirrors there. I know one of my kindergarten teachers bought one of those mirrors that you get when you're going to college, right? Yeah. But she put it horizontally and she anchored it in so it was safe. But that's right in her writing center, and right above the mirror is her sound wall. So when kids are writing, you'll see them and they'll go up to the mirror and they'll be doing this. And to me, too, it gives kids so much agency, and so much independence that they are doing the work and figuring things out and then mapping, sound to print. So it's really exciting. But I think sometimes when I talk to teachers, I feel like, and me too, that I in the past I would have gone to a word wall. Oh, I'm doing a sound wall, but I would have just moved all my words, and I would have just moved them over here, right? So really, when we're talking about sound walls, we're talking about anchors or guide words that really guide kids in how the sound is made, and they provide like an example of a word where that there's a sound to print match, right? So do you want to talk about that? Because I think sometimes that's a misconception about word walls and sound walls.
So I think, you've addressed a lot of those things, and getting teachers, especially in beginning reading, I think it's fine to put some of the words on the word wall, or on the sound wall at this point. But I don't think that a sound wall has a plethora of words on them. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like that's going to benefit students as much as trying to find my word on the sound wall. I use the sound wall once I'm introducing the patterns to start putting maybe a single word that follows that pattern. But I really encourage teachers to use their own spelling notebooks. Okay. And so I have a sound. Each page represents a sound, and I start to record the words. But it does leave for that opening of, so where do I put one?
I had that question a week ago. I did. I had that question a week ago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I ask my teachers, I say, where do you think you put one? And they say, well, we should put it under the w sound. And I said, what? Where are your kids going to look for it? They're going to look for it under that w sound.
That's right.
And I'm like, that's exactly
where it goes.
And so I had, yeah. And so that seems like, wow, that's this cognitive dissonance of, no, but one should go under O.
Oh, yeah, it is.
We're talking about sound.
Yeah, it's almost counterintuitive. But I think once you make that shift, it makes a lot of sense. Well, what's the sound? And that's where it goes, right?
And here's the thing: children can make sense of that so much more rapidly, and they can develop that ownership. And I think that that's what we have to think about as adults. This is the way I've always done it. But watching kids and how they make sense of things, it's kind of like, this makes so much sense, you know. And I've seen kindergarten teachers that, as I've introduced sound walls to them, making that shift mid-year. You know, all the words up on a word wall, then they say, I'm going to shift and I'm going to change everything to a sound wall. And then they start talking about it with kids, and kids are like, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, actually, I did a webcast. It's going to be a companion to yours, with 2 first grade teachers, had done a PLC on sound walls, and one teacher went right back, this is like October, and shifted to a sound wall. The other one kind of waited to mid-year. So I think that teachers enter in at different points, and they should enter in where they feel comfortable and ready to do that. But I think it's so great that they each went to that process, but they went it in their own way, and I think, you know, it's really important to honor that. So it's going to be a nice, I think, little companion piece to see how actually teachers kind of thought through it, because it is a shift. But you know, once they make that shift and they see how much their kids are learning, they're like, wow, I wish I would have known this before. Same for me when I was teaching. We just oftentimes aren't shared this, as you know, the science of reading, and sometimes, you know, the exact opposite. So, but I will say, I really believe that sound walls have. I think they are really making a linchpin change. I mean, it's like everyone's talking about sound walls, sending pictures of their sound walls, and working their way through it. And it's going to be great for kids. I had an email from a teacher last night and said, our whole school has sound walls now. And the teachers know, you know, why they have them and how to use them, and the kids are using them. But I can only imagine the difference in their phonology and their orthography and their reading skills as a result of that. It's just going to be really exciting to see. And I'm sure you've seen it over the world.
I do see it, and but I'm with you. It's waiting to see, like, from year to year. It's just been it's a relatively new understanding, and we had this conversation already about we don't want this to just be a fad, but the idea that this is going to be the long-term shift, because we have a clear understanding of what does it take to learn to read. We have the science to validate and support that. So why we would do this, word walls made sense when that was all we understood about reading, but now as we have a clearer and deeper understanding, we need to make the shift to come at it from the child perspective and to make more sense of things, matching that speech to the print, and not letting this be a that whole comment of, "Phew, that was exciting. We don't do that anymore." So keep in front of teachers and children, and I think validating the successes of how those things are working. And then Pam, there's one other thing, as we've talked about sound walls, starting with the sounds, beginning to add the print, and then I've had a lot of conversations with teachers of older students. So typically, you know, I say sound walls, you can start with them in pre-K, kinder first, into second, but then there's that conversation with older students. What about a sound wall? And now I want to spell with the sh sound, but sound that's spelled T-I in the middle of many words that are the root word with the Latin. Well, now we've moved to something that's a more advanced spelling purpose and teaching about the orthography. So I think that's another conversation to have as we dig more deeply into those types of things. And I think that would look very different than what we're looking at here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure that would be a question that would come up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anything else we need to know about sound walls before we sign off? I mean, it's just been a wonderful conversation. I know teachers are going to be watching this to really glean from you. I mean, Mary, you are the international expert on sound walls, and we're really grateful to you, because it's oftentimes too is an entry point into the science of reading.
Yes.
Right. So so we begin to talk about the features of our language, and it's a really great tool for teachers to use. And so it's kind of like this entry point into, now they want to learn more about our language and how to teach it in the science of reading. So it's a wonderful resource for teachers and kids, but also an entry point into that science of reading and learning more. That's what I've seen with teachers. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think that what are we talking about when we talk about the science of reading? Well, this is where we're starting, and as you said, that entry point, so that I actually know, oh, I am making these shifts, and it's the gradual shifts, wading in, trying it out, giving yourself grace.
Yes.
And you know what? Things are going to go perfectly every time, and kids are very forgiving, which is an awesome thing.
They are, and the schools that I've been working with, the kids really loved the interaction with the sound wall. They love the little mirrors. You'll see them holding their little, here, is it voiced or not? And sometimes folks think, well, kids can't understand those terms like affricates or glides, or some of the schools use like the lips, like lip poppers and tongue scrapers. Yes. But they really can, and it really describes what's happening in their mouth. It makes it concrete for them. It gives them that anchor to hold on to, and really to be thinking about analyzing through the whole word, which is so important to that orthographic mapping piece, where kids are not just kind of guessing from the first letter, especially when they're reading, when they're having that phonological practice to anchor themselves phonologically through all the sounds in the word. Just so critically important to building skilled readers and writers. So
I have to say, and kids, they teach you.
Yes.
So one class that I was with, the kids were like this. They do this. What's my sound?
Yeah.
and
covered up. Can you guess?
Their friends would have to describe what sound was on the car and give them keywords.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting.
And I was like, I'd never thought of that, but it was so cute because they were really interested in, can I describe this?
Yes.
Can I do this the way that my teacher has done? And gave me lots of cues to say, okay, I need to reteach that, or wow, they really mastered it.
Isn't that something?
It's so much fun to be able to do and to play with, and it's valuable.
Yeah, it is.
It's not just play to be doing a game. These are things that I'm learning in order to
and the
skills.
Kids, that's what I mean. When the kids love to be engaged in it, and it's effective for teaching, I mean, how often do we get a win-win on both of those? And so really sound walls really meets that criteria. So we're really grateful to you for all the knowledge that you've shared. You're always so generous with your work. You've shared webinars, you're doing this one to really share with us, so thank you for that. I am going to mention some of your tools that you have. This is an instructional guide for actually how to teach the speech sounds in a very direct, explicit manner, like an I do, we do, you do. And I really encourage teachers to, when they're working on this grade level wise, if they can, we certainly hope that they are all engaged in very consistent practices. So when, if it's a paraprofessional or a teacher or anyone who's working on teaching speech sounds or helping kids navigate their way through that they are teaching them in an accurate manner. And this is a wonderful guide to make sure that happens. And really appreciate too Antonio Fierro's contributions to this as well, because it talks about the influence of the Spanish language and the speech sounds that are common and not common, and really makes that very clear and specific. And we love the kid lips. As I said, lots of teachers will purchase these, and others will just have their kids make the kid lips too. And so important too when we start mapping sound to print, that the cue cards actually make the sound. So one thing we found oftentimes I'll take different sets of alphabet cards with a picture, and we'll just go through those, and I'll just say, listen as we go through, and do you actually hear the sound for that letter that letter makes? So for example, one cue card was egg for and it really sounds like more like a. And actually even one pack had a xylophone for X. And we said, well, X says X, and you have a Q, so you're saying to the kids, X xylophone, X. And the kids are thinking X, this picture makes a Z sound. So certainly with your cards, we never have to worry about that. And then these sound spelling cards are absolutely wonderful because of all the information they have on the back about the sounds and how to teach them. So you really make it very explicit and clear and provide such support for teachers to implement like a nascent practice. So I want to thank you for that and for your generosity and all the webinars that we see out there that you do, and for doing this webcast with me today. Thank you.
Pam, thanks for having me.
Sure.
Good to be with you. Yay!
Yay, we did it. Yeah, we had a little bit of a windstorm last time and couldn't do it, so we finally got to finish it. So thank you, Mary. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right.
All right.
Mary, do you want to tell them like maybe your email address in case they wanted to ask any questions from you?
Yeah. My email is Mary and it's tools4reading.com.
Yeah.
And everything's on my website at tools4reading.com.
Yeah.
I know Pam has that on is it the Padlet?
Yes, I have it on the Padlet. Yep, I have a Padlet. I'll put that in the resources. I'll put your information so they can contact you. And I did create a Padlet with like Soundwall resources for everybody too. So we'll attach that too. All right.
So many great resources you've created for us. So
well, Patton, I'm lucky to work at Patton. So all right. Well, thank you, Mary. All right, so that's it for this Leaders and Learning and Literacy webcast. A big thank you again to Dr. Mary Dahlgren for teaching us all about sound walls. And we'll see you next time very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.